Hey Reddit, this is my first time here, so I'm not entirely sure if I'm doing this right. A friend of mine recommended I come on here to share my story after I confided in her. She was taken aback and didn't quite know how to help, so I figured I'd give this a try. I guess I'm here to vent and seek some advice because I really need to process what's happened. This is going to be a bit of a long one, but I hope you'll stick with me. I need to get this off my chest, vent, and maybe gain some perspective on how to move forward and fix things. A little background to help you understand where I'm coming from. My name is Lisa, I'm 29 years old, and I've been married to Greg, who is 31, for about 5 years. Our relationship has been generally good. We've had our share of ups and downs, but overall we've been happy together. Greg is an amazing guy, romantic, caring, and always willing to go above and beyond for me. Greg and I met in college, and I liked him right away. He had this quiet, almost distant vibe that made him hard to get close to at first. He wasn't the type to open up easily, and it felt like he was always keeping everyone at a distance. I won't lie, it was tough to break through that wall he had up. He was cold, shut off, and didn't really let anyone see what was going on with him. But for some reason I was drawn to him. I kept trying, slowly but surely, to get closer. I spent time with him, and little by little, I started to see glimpses of who he really was underneath that tough exterior. It took time and patience, but eventually we connected, and once we started dating, things really started to click. 5 years ago, we decided to get married. Our relationship hasn't been perfect, but we've made it work. Greg has always been a bit of a closed book when it comes to his emotions. He's never been the type to talk about his feelings or what's bothering him. But despite that, we've managed to stay together. However, there's always been one issue that has always bothered us. Greg has never been great at opening up about his feelings. He's always been a bit sensitive and struggles to express what's really going on inside. I've always tried to be supportive and patient with him, but I must admit that I sometimes find it challenging to navigate these emotional issues, especially when I'm dealing with my own stress and overwhelmed myself. Greg's struggle with vulnerability has always been something I've tried to work around. I often feel like I'm walking on glass, trying to be supportive without pushing too hard or making things worse. I'm a stay-at-home wife, and I've been in this role since Greg and I got married. He's the one who works and pays the bills, which fits into our traditional setup and works well for us. Greg grew up in a very traditional household where men were taught to be stoic and silent about their feelings. It was instilled in him from a young age that expressing emotions was a sign of weakness, and that's something that has stayed with him throughout his life. We both have had our fair share of trauma to work through because of these traditional values. So, a couple of weeks ago, we had one of those deep, heart-to-heart conversations where Greg began to open up about his insecurities and feelings. For him, this was a very huge thing because, as I mentioned, he's not very open about his emotions. He started sharing some really personal stuff about his childhood struggles, how they've affected his self-esteem, and how they're impacting our relationship. I was genuinely trying to be supportive during this conversation. I listened carefully, reassured him, and tried to offer comfort. However, in the middle of this serious discussion, I made a misguided attempt to lighten the mood. I thought a little joke might make him feel better. So, while Greg was talking about feeling like the weak link in his family and the pressure of being strong and stoic, I made a comment. I said something along the lines of, "Oh gosh, a man opening up. I think I'm getting the ick. You're just emotionally challenged. If you were any more sensitive, you'd be a walking soap opera." At the time, I thought it was a harmless, lighthearted quip meant to make him laugh and lighten the mood. But looking back, I realized it was completely out of place and insensitive. Greg's face, which had been soft and vulnerable, immediately turned stone-cold serious. He went from being open and emotionally exposed to shutting down entirely. It was like a switch had been flipped. He didn't say anything right away, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. I tried to backtrack and apologize, but I knew deep down that I had already crossed a line. The mood in the room shifted dramatically. I felt a sinking feeling in my chest as I realized how badly I had messed up. I tried to apologize immediately after making the joke, but Greg's reaction was just a cold silence. I could see the hurt in his eyes, but he wasn't saying anything. I reassured myself that things would blow over after a few days. We've had our share of disagreements before, and we usually manage to work things out eventually. But this time felt different. Greg became increasingly distant and withdrawn, which was totally out of character for him. He wasn't someone who easily opened up about his feelings, but he was usually warm and caring. This sudden shift was unsettling. The sweet and considerate Greg I knew seemed to have vanished and had been replaced by someone who was now colder and more closed off than ever. I tried bringing up what had happened, hoping to address the issue and mend things. Each time I did, he would brush it off with vague responses or simply change the subject. It felt like he was putting up a wall, making it almost impossible to reach him. His usual warmth was gone, and I felt like I was losing touch with the person I thought I knew so well. Greg's behavior continued to take a drastic turn for the worse. It started with him pulling away from me emotionally and physically. He stopped helping around the house, and then, alarmingly, he withdrew all the money from our joint account. That should have been a red flag, but I didn't fully grasp what was happening until it was too late. A few days ago, Greg brought a dog home. The problem is, I'm deathly allergic to dogs. I reminded him of my allergy and asked him to return the dog to the shelter. We argued back and forth, and I could feel my frustration building. Eventually, I told him that he'd have to choose between me and the dog. Greg's response was immediate and shocking. He chose the dog. He told me to pack my things and leave his house. I was stunned. I tried to brush it off as a joke, even laughed nervously, but Greg was dead serious. He told me he was fed up with me not supporting him and that the dog was better than me. He said I was emotionally unavailable and that he didn't want to repeat his childhood trauma by staying with someone who thought it was icky for a man to open up. I tried to apologize and reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. It was like he had been waiting for an excuse to push me out. Feeling like I was in a nightmare, I packed up what I could and left for my best friend's place. Her husband and kids are away on vacation, so there's space for me now, but they'll be back in a week or so. After that, I'll have no place to go. I'm at a loss, feeling completely puzzled by how quickly things have deteriorated. Greg, my husband is so loving and supportive, but now he seems like a completely different person now. My best friend suggested I post here because she's as confused by Greg's behavior as I am. I'm struggling to understand why he expects me to be constantly emotionally available, especially when I'm not the one who traumatized him. I realize it might sound selfish, but I'm genuinely frustrated. I need advice on how to handle this situation. I can't afford to be homeless, and I'm running out of options. What can I do to fix this? Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Thanks so much for the advice and comments you gave on my last post. A lot of you pointed out that what's happening now didn't just start recently. It's been building up for a while. You were right. I didn't realize how much I'd been shutting Greg down and not taking his feelings seriously. After posting here, I reached out to Greg, but he wouldn't talk to me directly, so I asked my best friend to call him for me. Eventually, Greg did respond to her. They talked for a while, and then I asked my friend to let Greg know that my mistake was a one-time thing and that he was probably overthinking it. That approach didn't work out too well. Greg sent me a really long text, which I'll summarize here. In his message, he laid out several times when I'd undermined him and made him feel bad. For example, he used to keep diaries as a kid because he had trouble expressing his feelings. I made fun of this habit without realizing how important it was for him. He also mentioned times when he tried to talk about his family issues and how they compared him to his siblings, making him feel inadequate. I brushed it off, saying everyone has family problems and his weren't a big deal. Another time, when he was stressed about work, I joked that he was being overly dramatic and should handle stress better, like everyone else. When Greg tried to tell me he felt emotionally isolated and wanted to be more open but didn't know how, I laughed and told him I wasn't sure I could handle any more drama from him. I suggested maybe he should just keep bottling things up like he always did. Looking back, I see how dismissive that was, but at the time, I thought I was just lightening the mood. There were other moments when he expressed doubts about his ability to be a good partner. Instead of offering support, I minimized his feelings, accusing him of starting unnecessary relationship drama. I told him we were doing fine and that he was just being overly dramatic. Whenever he tried to open up, I'd roll my eyes or make a sarcastic comment, which only made him shut down more. One time, Greg shared that he felt he wasn't achieving his personal goals and was worried about failing in life. I brushed it off by saying he was making everything into a big crisis and that some people had real problems to deal with. I didn't realize how hurtful that was. When he confessed to feeling inadequate as a husband and provider, I literally groaned and complained that I didn't know I had married such a sensitive soul. I told him to just toughen up and deal with it. I didn't offer any reassurance or support, just more dismissal. During a serious conversation about our marital problems, Greg admitted he felt disconnected from me and wished I was more emotionally available. I responded by saying I didn't need a drama queen or a soap opera every time we discussed issues. I suggested we just move on and not dwell on it, and completely ignored his need for emotional connection. When Greg said he was feeling really down and needed more emotional support, I made a sarcastic comment about him acting like womanly men, and if he was going to start writing poetry and crying into a journal. I thought I was being funny, but I realize now that it was hurtful and dismissive. Another time, Greg tried to tell me he felt like he wasn't living up to my expectations and was scared of failing me. Instead of comforting him, I told him he was making a big deal out of nothing, just like he always did. I made it sound like his worries weren't important and that I wasn't expecting him to be perfect. Looking back, I see that my responses were not only unhelpful, but also pushed him further away. I didn't take his feelings seriously, and now I understand how my comments made him feel even more isolated and unsupported. I had no idea how much my comments and attitude were hurting him. It's clear now that he was keeping track of all these moments, and they've added up to what's happening now. I know I messed up, and I want to fix things. I'm starting to see how my behavior has affected Greg, and I'm trying to understand it better. I know it won't be easy to repair things, and Greg might need time. I just hope with some genuine effort and change, we can work things out. Update.
Hey Reddit, it's me again.
I've been reading through the comments from my last post, and wow, the responses were brutal. A lot of you who were sympathetic at first told me I deserved it, and that you hoped Greg would leave me. Well, it looks like your wishes are coming true, because Greg has decided he wants a divorce. A few days after Greg sent me that long text, I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything. I finally reached out to him and asked if we could meet in person to talk. He was reluctant at first and wanted to stick to texting, but I insisted on a face-to-face conversation. When I showed up at the house, we had a very long discussion. I don't have time to go into every detail since my lunch break is almost over, but I want to share the gist of it. I apologized to Greg profusely. I told him how sorry I was for constantly undermining his feelings and for not being supportive. I explained that my behavior came from my strict upbringing and not from a lack of love or respect for him. Greg listened quietly throughout my apology. After I expressed my desire to fix things, he finally spoke up. What he said felt like a punch to the gut, and he told me there was no chance for us to repair our relationship. He said he wanted a divorce, and that he hadn't known how to tell me before, but now he was certain. Greg said he was done with being in a relationship where his partner was emotionally unavailable. He wanted someone who would be there for him, just as he was there for them. I started crying and begged him to reconsider. I told him I loved him and that this wasn't something we should let break us apart, but he wouldn't change his mind. He told me he was done talking and asked me to leave. I tried reaching out to my best friend, hoping she could persuade him, but he ignored her too. Feeling desperate, I called my parents, who live states away. They're strongly against divorce and tried to talk to Greg, but he refused to listen. I even reached out to Greg's parents and siblings, but they had no luck either. Greg's sister said he even threatened to cut them off if they continued to push him on this. It feels like I'm living in a nightmare that I can't wake up from. I'm struggling to accept that Greg isn't going to change his mind. I keep hoping he'll come to his senses, but it's been weeks now, and nothing has changed. I'm exhausted and numb. My best friend can no longer host me, so I've been couch surfing, but I can't keep this up forever. I don't have many friends and nowhere else to turn. I feel so alone and lost right now. I don't know what to do next. If anyone has any advice or suggestions, I'd really appreciate it.
Update.
A lot of you have been saying I deserve this and that Greg deserves better. Well, honestly, screw you. It's easy to pass judgment from the sidelines. As for the actual update for those who genuinely care, Greg still wants a divorce. He hasn't had a change of heart. I can't understand why he can't just toughen up and work through things. Now I'm completely homeless. I can only couch surf for so long, and now I'm stuck staying at homeless shelters. It's a harsh fall from where I was just a few months ago. How the fuck does everything change in such a short time? To make matters worse, I was served divorce papers. Greg didn't just send them, he invited me to his workplace under the guise of having lunch with me. I thought maybe he was reconsidering and finally coming to his senses, but instead, he used the meeting to serve me the papers. I was livid. I started screaming, made a scene, and security had to escort me out. It's not my proudest moment, but I felt utterly betrayed and humiliated. I'm now in a situation where I have no money, no home, and my stuff is still at Greg's place because I have nowhere to keep it. It feels like I'm no different from the people on the streets. I'm trying to survive and make sense of it all, but it feels like I'm stuck in a nightmare or a bad video game. My parents, who live far away, have talked about buying me a ticket to come back and be closer to them. They're disappointed in both me and Greg. They believe if I had been a better wife, this wouldn't have happened. They're very traditional and not being very rational about it all.
No.
So that's where I'm at right now, just trying to get by and figure out my next steps. Update.
Hey, Reddit.
Phew, it's been a couple of months, and boy, do I have a long update for you. Buckle up. I took a break from posting because I was overwhelmed and saw no point in updating. I was already dealing with being homeless and broke, and the last thing I needed was more flaming. So first things first, the divorce is finalized. It went pretty quickly, honestly. We'd only been married for 5 years, and since we had no kids and kept our finances separate, there weren't too many complications. It was painful, but it was straightforward. Greg kept the house, all his money, and the savings. Everything was his, and nothing was mine. After the divorce, my parents generously sent me money for a plane ticket. I packed up my things from Greg's place and went back home. It's been a few months now, and life has been rough. This isn't how I imagined my life would turn out. Being in my late 20s and back at my parents' house, a place I've always disliked. My parents have been laying the blame on me. They keep saying things like no one will want to marry me again, and how I've messed up my life. They keep insisting that I must have done something to upset Greg, that I wasn't a good wife, and all that crap. Some days they also turn around and blame Greg, saying he was less of a man and all that nonsense. The truth is, Greg was more of a man than any of them could ever be, more than my dad could ever be. They're so set in their ways that nothing seems to change their minds. It's exhausting and honestly demoralizing. I know many of you have suggested I get a therapist to deal with the emotional fallout, and I agree. I do need help, but right now, I can't afford it. I'm scraping together every penny just to save up enough to move out of my parents' house. Therapy will have to wait until I'm more stable. For now, I'm just trying to get through each day. It feels like I'm barely hanging on, but that's where I'm at. On the bright side, I did get a job. It doesn't pay much, but I'm saving every penny I can. Unfortunately, my parents charge me rent, which is almost as much as it would be if I had a roommate somewhere else. So I've been trying to save up for a down payment and also looking for a roommate so I can move out. It's a constant fucking circle, trying to find a place, save money, and figure out how to make ends meet. I don't even have enough for fun money. I can't remember the last time I did something fun or bought myself something that wasn't a necessity. Life feels surreal. One minute I was married and thought everything was okay, and the next I'm back at my parents' house, trying to make sense of it all. It's maddening and frustrating. I'm just trying to survive and get back on my feet, but it's a struggle every day.
Update.
Hey Reddit, somehow I ended up logging back in after a few weeks and saw that some of you are still asking for updates. It's kind of surprising given how harshly some of you were before, saying I deserved everything bad that happened to me. Anyway, here's a bit of an update on how things have been going. First off, the silver lining. Greg seems to be finally standing up for himself. I've heard that he's distanced himself from his parents and is now keeping low contact with his siblings. It's a big shift from how he used to handle family issues, and it's good to see him setting boundaries and taking control of his own life. Even though we're no longer together, I still wish him the best. I hate him for leaving and abandoning me, but seeing him stand up for himself is a positive change. I still miss him a lot. I think about him, about us, and what could have been. We had plans to start trying for kids next year, and now that's all gone. It's still so hard to accept that everything ended in the twinkle of an eye, and I keep on thinking about what we had and what we lost. On my end, I've started to stand up for myself more. I guess I've been inspired by Greg's changes. I've been pushing back against my parents and ignoring their constant criticisms. I've pulled back from church activities and stopped trying to conform to their expectations. It feels like I'm finally going through a rebellious phase, even if it's a bit late in life, haha. When they try to remind me that they're housing me, I remind them that I'm paying rent and am not a freeloader. It's definitely not what they expected, and they hate it, but it's giving me some much-needed satisfaction. Work has been my main focus, long hours and extra shifts, all in an effort to save up and eventually move out of my parents' house. Life is pretty uneventful right now, but I guess that's to be expected given everything that's happened, so that's the update. Thanks for those who have been supportive. The rest of you, well, you know where you stand. Hey Reddit, I'm here with one of the most insane stories ever, but I need you to walk with me and listen because I really do need some advice. It took a lot of courage to share this here, and if it wasn't for the fact that I really don't know what to do, I wouldn't have even posted this. So, just buckle up because this is going to be a wild ride. For some context, I've been married to David for about 3 years. We met in college, and it was love at first sight. At least, it was for David. I did love him, but I've always been more of a polygamous person, and so I couldn't fully commit to him. Like I said, I've always been more of a polygamous person, though I didn't fully realize it until after David and I had been married for about a year. Don't get me wrong, we were happy. We had a good relationship, but as time went on, something just felt off. It was like this nagging feeling that I couldn't shake, like something was missing from my life, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. At first I brushed it off, thinking it was just a phase or maybe some boredom that comes with settling into marriage. But the more I explored my feelings and searched deep within myself, the more I realized that I could never be truly happy just being monogamous. It wasn't about David not being enough or about our relationship lacking in any way. It was more about me. I craved variety, excitement, and connection with different people. It wasn't just about physical attraction either. I wanted to experience emotional bonds with multiple people too. We had been together for a very long time despite only being married for 3 years, and I knew him inside out. I was well aware that polygamy was something he would never agree to. He was a traditional, monogamous man, and I knew that bringing up the idea of polygamy or open relationships would probably devastate him. I loved him, and I didn't want to lose him. Also, I couldn't leave David because he was financially stable. He was wealthy, had a trust fund, and I was entirely dependent on him. I was a stay-at-home wife, which I actually loved. So I felt trapped between a rock and a hard place. I couldn't explore my sexuality without risking financial ruin. Things between David and me were pretty good. Sure, we had our share of ups and downs, but overall, we got along well. To add to this, David and I had a prenup that included a cheating clause. This made it even more complicated. I couldn't just go out and cheat without facing serious consequences. I told myself that I would be careful. But then I met Tom, a guy from my gym. Tom was really nice and attractive. And while I initially told myself we would just be friends, things quickly spiraled out of control. The thing is, the gym I went to was pretty far from where I lived. I picked a place far away on purpose so that no one would recognize me. David had bought me a car, which made it easier to get there. I wanted to keep my life as separate as possible from my affair. Tom, the guy from the gym, didn't know I was married. I told him I was single, and I was okay with that lie because at first I thought he didn't have to know I was married. That doesn't make sense, I know. I was literally just looking for any excuse to justify my lie. Tom and I started hanging out a lot. At first we were just friends, but it quickly became clear that he wanted more. I knew he was interested, but I kept telling myself that I could handle it if things started to get serious. Before I knew it, we were having a full-blown affair. It wasn't hard to keep up the charade. What was tough was lying to Tom. I told him I traveled a lot for work and could only see him a few times a week. When I needed to stay the night at Tom's place, I would just tell David I was hanging out with friends. David never questioned me, which was both a blessing and a problem. It was a blessing because it meant I could keep my secret life without immediate trouble, but a problem because it showed how little David knew about what was really going on. Keeping up with the lies was exhausting. I had to remember every detail of my story, where I was, what I was doing, and who I was with. Balancing everything was tough, but I thought I had everything under control. One affair was manageable, but things really got complicated when I met Reggie on a dating app. I was just curious. I was exploring the app for fun, and thinking I'd chat with a few people or maybe make some friends. I never expected to actually connect with someone. But Reggie and I hit it off, and before long, we were in an affair. Then the pattern repeated. I found myself in affairs with the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth people. It was all so fast and amazing, and I was juggling 7 different affairs. None of them knew I was married. Keeping up the charade was incredibly difficult. I had to get a second phone to manage all the texts, calls, and interactions without raising suspicion. I hid the phone in a secure spot in the house. I always did the cleaning, so that made it easier to hide the phone well. David was also at work most of the day, so that gave me the time I needed to manage everything without him noticing. At first, having multiple affairs was exciting. It felt like a secret adventure, something exciting and wild. But as time went on, it became more of a challenge to see how long I could keep it all going. The excitement faded, and what started as a game turned into a complicated mess. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was crossing lines I shouldn't have. I'm not here to justify my actions. There's no excuse for what I did. Honestly, I don't even know what I was thinking. It was reckless and stupid. It was reckless and stupid, but at the time, I didn't realize how badly I was messing up. The more I got tangled up in my affairs, the more distant I became from my husband. Juggling 7 people was exhausting, and I barely had time or energy left for David. He started noticing my absence. I'd lock myself in the bedroom or spend long stretches in the bathroom just so I could use my second phone without him finding out. Sometimes I'd go to the farthest corner of the house or even step outside just to have a moment of privacy. I couldn't afford to get caught. But I guess now I realize all those things just drew my husband's attention and definitely made him suspicious. My lack of time and attention for David was noticeable. We went from being close to barely communicating. It felt like I was living 2 separate lives, and keeping up with both was taking a toll. I was so wrapped up in trying to keep my lies straight and manage my secret life that I barely had any energy left for my husband. I'd avoid conversations and make excuses to be alone. I'd be curt with him and make excuses about being tired or needing personal space whenever he confronted me on my behavior. This distance didn't go unnoticed by my affair partners either. They started picking up on my weird behavior. I was often late or distracted during our meetups, and it was clear that I wasn't giving them the attention they expected. Some of them started questioning why I was always so secretive and why I couldn't meet up as often as I promised. They'd ask why I seemed so tired or why I couldn't stay on the phone for long. They could sense something was off, but I always somehow managed to deflect their concerns with more excuses and vague answers. I couldn't keep up with the lies forever, and eventually I got caught. The way my husband found out was nothing short of dramatic and utterly embarrassing. It all started with my birthday approaching. David asked me what I wanted to do to celebrate, and I told him I wanted to keep things low-key and just relax. Knowing David, I figured he'd still try to surprise me in some way, like he always did. On the night of my birthday, instead of coming home from work, David texted me to come over to his mom's house. Immediately, I suspected he was planning a surprise party. He often chose his mom's place for surprises, since he assumed I'd be at home all day, as I don't have a lot of friends, and am a stay-at-home wife. That means our house isn't a good place to use for surprises. This wasn't the first time he'd pulled a stunt like this. Before heading over, I tried to find my second phone, but it was nowhere to be found. I thought maybe I'd just misplaced it or forgotten where I kept it. I've done that before, and decided to look again the next day when David was at work. When I arrived at his mom's house, I was greeted with shouts of "Happy Birthday" from David, his family, and our mutual friends. It was a nice surprise, and for a moment I felt genuine excitement. I noticed my family wasn't there, but I wasn't too surprised since they lived far away and couldn't have made it on short notice. Everything seemed fine until I took a closer look at the crowd. To my shock, there were all 7 of my affair partners mingling among the guests. My jaw dropped as I realized what was happening. David had planned this whole thing as a way to expose my affairs. His expression said it all. He was furious. I tried to leave, but people blocked the door and wouldn't let me escape. David played it cool, insisting that I enjoy the party while everyone just continued as if nothing was wrong, even my affair partners. I was mortified. The embarrassment hit me so hard that I began to cry, but no one even paid any attention to my tears. The night took a turn for the worse when it was time for pictures. David insisted I take a photo with all 7 of my affair partners. He then made me upload the picture to all my social media accounts, and he did the same on his and included a detailed caption exposing each of them as my lovers. Then he gave me my second phone, the phone which I thought I had misplaced. Only after this public shaming did David finally let me leave. It was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. I was devastated and ashamed, and I couldn't believe how far David had gone to make his point. Just when I thought the worst was over, things took another disastrous turn. As soon as I finally managed to leave David's mom's house, I found all 7 of my affair partners waiting for me outside. They had clearly been waiting for the right moment to confront me, and they were furious. The moment I stepped outside, they bombarded me with accusations. They were furious, calling me a liar and a fraud. One of them, Reggie, was especially vocal. They kept all demanding to know why I had lied and led them on, but the thing is, I had no reason why. The confrontation was so loud and embarrassing. To my horror, I noticed that some of them were filming the whole thing on their phones. They were documenting the entire confrontation, probably planning to post it on TikTok or other social media platforms. After my affair partners finally left me standing there, I was a mess. I didn't have much to say to them, and my apologies felt hollow even to me. I was completely at a loss for words. I was just overwhelmed by the weight of my actions and the public humiliation I'd just endured. They walked off, and I hurried back home. Thankfully, David wasn't home yet, so I had a chance to make things right, or so I hoped. I threw myself into cleaning the house and preparing dinner for when he came back. I changed into one of my nicest outfits. I was hoping to present myself in the best possible light. My plan was to beg for forgiveness and try to convince him to work things out. I knew I had made huge mistakes, but I was desperate to fix them. I waited all night for David to come home. When he didn't show up, I was deeply disappointed, but tried to stay hopeful. The next day, he still didn't come back, and the day after that, I felt completely lost. During those 2 days, my phone had been relentless. Calls, texts, and messages were pouring in from everyone: my parents, siblings, extended family, and even friends. I was so embarrassed and overwhelmed that I couldn't bring myself to answer any of them. My family had somehow found out through David or social media, and they were all reaching out to me, bewildered and disappointed. My friends were calling to find out what had happened, and my husband's family wasn't holding back either. They sent me hateful messages and nasty comments about how I'd betrayed David and embarrassed everyone involved. When David finally returned home, I hoped he had come back to talk things through, maybe to discuss our situation calmly. But the moment he walked in, it was clear that he had no intention of reconciling. I immediately offered to do whatever it took to make things right. I told him I was willing to delete all my social media accounts, give up my phone, share my location, and even stay home all day if that's what he wanted. I would go to therapy, and we would both go for couples counseling. I was ready to do anything to prove my commitment to fixing our marriage. David's reaction was so harsh and unforgiving. He told me that what I was suggesting was ridiculous, and that he wasn't interested in controlling me like a child. He said that the time for damage control had passed, and that he was done trying to fix things. His words were like a punch to the gut. David gave me just an hour to pack my things and leave. He said he had expected me to be gone within the 2 days he was away, and was shocked to find me still there. The house was in his name, and legally, I had no ground to contest his decision. I begged and pleaded with him, crying and saying that I was confused, that I didn't know what I was doing, and that I had been deceived. But he wouldn't hear any of it. David was resolute. He said that he couldn't stand to be around me anymore and that our marriage was over. I wanted him to at least give me more time, but he wasn't going to give me any more time. He made it very clear that our marriage was over, and he had no desire to even try to salvage what was left. I begged him to reconsider, to give me another chance, but his mind was made up. The more I pleaded, the angrier he became. He told me I had ruined our marriage and what I had done couldn't be undone. He couldn't trust me anymore, and he certainly wasn't going to let me stay in his home after everything I had done. I felt completely numb as I packed my things and left. I didn't have anywhere to go, and my mind was racing with a million thoughts. Now I'm staying with a friend, and I honestly don't know what to do next. My family refuses to talk to me, and the affair partners have all blocked me. Everywhere I turn, people know about my mistakes, and it feels like there's no escape from the shame and judgment. I know I brought this on myself, but I'm still struggling. I need my husband. Is there any way I can earn his forgiveness? I realize now how badly I had messed up, not just with David, but with everyone involved. I have lost my husband, my stability, and my entire life was crumbling before my eyes. How do I cope with the fallout of my decisions? Reddit, I could really use some advice on what to do next. How do I start over after everything I've done? Is that even possible? How do I come to terms with the fact that I've destroyed my marriage and my reputation?
Update.
Hey Reddit. Well, first of all, I have to say it's kind of sad, but also kind of nice that some people have found humor in my post. I got a lot of hilarious comments that actually had me laughing out loud. It's weird how laughter can make things feel lighter, even in the middle of this complete mess. Sure, there was also a lot of hate and bewildered comments about how I managed to juggle 7 affairs, but the thing is, being a stay-at-home wife with no kids with very few friends made that possible. Trust me, guys, it wasn't as glamorous or easy as some of you might think. It was an emotional roller coaster, and honestly, I regret it deeply. A lot of people were shocked and disgusted, and I understand why. Some of you gave me advice on how to fix things, but I don't even know if that's possible anymore. Others still think this is fake or some kind of joke. I wish it were. I wish I could tell you that this is all made up, but unfortunately this is my reality. My life right now is in complete shambles, and I honestly don't know how to get out of it. As for the updates that a lot of you have been asking for, well, there's not much to say. David doesn't want to forgive me. He's still pushing for a divorce, and no matter how much I try to talk to him, he's made up his mind. He doesn't even answer my texts or calls anymore. He's hell-bent on cutting me out of his life completely, and that hurts more than I can even explain. His family has been relentless. They're sending me nasty messages, prank calling me, and signing me up for all sorts of spam and newsletters. It's so petty, but at the same time, it's draining. They use random numbers or private them, so I have no way to prove it's them. Even if I did, David would probably still side with them. He's rushing the divorce, and honestly, I don't know what to do. I asked him if I could leave to go be with my family, who live out of state, but he wants me to wait until everything is finalized. The problem is, I'm running out of time. I'm staying with a friend, but they can only host me for a few more weeks, and after that, I have nowhere to go. My family isn't even speaking to me, and I've been begging them for money just so I can get a plane ticket, but they're not willing to help me. They've completely turned their backs on me, and I can't blame them. I've made such a mess of things. David wiped out our joint account, so I'm basically broke. I don't have access to any of the money we once shared, and I wasn't even allowed to take the jewelry he bought me when I left. He didn't even let me take the car or anything expensive that he had bought me. It feels like I'm about to start from scratch, and I have nothing to fall back on. And in case you were wondering, all my affair partners have blocked me. There's no one left. I can't even borrow money or ask for help from them. I've burned every bridge. I feel like everything's falling apart faster than I can keep up with, and it's terrifying. It's like the scales are falling from my eyes, and I'm seeing clearly for the first time. What the hell was I thinking? Why did I waste so much time sneaking around, betraying my husband? For what? It didn't make me happy. It didn't give me the thrill I thought it would. All it did was tear apart the one person who genuinely loved me. I miss David so much. I miss our late-night drives, our spontaneous dates, the way he'd hold me close at night. I miss the smell of his cologne on the pillow and the way he'd laugh at my terrible jokes. I miss the life we had, and I hate myself for throwing it all away. I can't help but wonder if there's any way to fix this, but deep down, I know the damage is done. I just wish I could go back and undo it all. I wish I could take away the pain I've caused and make things right, But I know that's not possible, and I'm scared of what comes next. What do I do now? Where do I go from here? Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Mini update because things have been moving fast, and honestly, I'm just trying to keep up. A few days ago, I got served divorce papers. I know I should have updated sooner, but it's been a whirlwind, and I'm only just starting to process everything now. My friend who was hosting me couldn't keep me any longer, so I had to leave. Right now, I'm staying at a homeless shelter while trying to figure out what to do next. It feels surreal, being in this situation after everything, but it's where I am. I've been reaching out to other friends, hoping someone might be able to take me in for just a little while longer, at least until the divorce is finalized. But honestly, people have been pretty distant. I guess that's what happens when you've burned as many bridges as I have. And like I mentioned, I got served the divorce papers a few days ago. At first, I was completely numb. I just stared at them for what felt like an eternity, not even processing what was happening. And then, when I was finally alone, I broke down. I cried for hours, just feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. It's a weird kind of pain, one that I brought on myself but still hits so hard. I've sent so many voice notes to David, just crying, begging him to take me back. I know how pathetic that sounds, but I couldn't help myself. I miss him so much. I miss what we had, and it feels like a part of me is dying knowing that I can never get that back. He hasn't responded to any of my messages or calls. It's like I don't exist to him anymore. And I guess, in a way, I understand. I was stupid, confused, and honestly selfish. I've realized now that I'm not built for a polygamous lifestyle. I don't know what I was thinking. 7 affairs? It feels like I was trying to sabotage my own happiness without even knowing it. In a weird twist, a lot of you sent me TikTok links to people narrating stories that sound a lot like mine. I wasn't even sure what to think. But then I watched one, and yeah, I recognized one of my affair partners. He's turned this whole mess into a story time. Thankfully, it hasn't gone viral, at least not yet. But seriously, what is my life right now? The fact that someone I was involved with is casually making content about this disaster just makes everything feel even more surreal. On a somewhat positive note, my family has finally started talking to me again. I guess they've seen the mess I'm in and decided to offer some help, though it's on their terms. They said they'd send me money for a plane ticket if I come home as soon as the divorce is finalized. Their condition is that I can't have any ties left in this state when I leave. I have to come back to their house and pretty much follow whatever plan they have for me. I don't really have a choice at this point, so I agreed. At least I'll have somewhere to go once all of this is over. For now, I'm just waiting. I've been reaching out to more friends, trying to see if anyone can help me stay with them for a bit longer. My parents are also contacting people they know here to see if anyone can offer me some temporary assistance. I guess they don't want me forming any new attachments here, because they're really serious about me leaving and not looking back. It's so strange, waiting for a divorce to be finalized when you don't want it at all. I never thought this is where my life would end up, but here I am, watching it all unravel. Every day feels like a countdown to something I can't stop, and I'm terrified of what's next. I don't know how to pick up the pieces or where to start once the dust settles. Thanks to everyone who's reached out and tried to give advice or even just offered a kind word. I know a lot of you think I deserve all of this, and maybe I do, but it doesn't make it any less painful. I just hope I can figure out a way forward. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Wow, it's been a while. First off, I want to apologize for the radio silence. Life's been a roller coaster, and I was so caught up trying to survive it all that I couldn't bring myself to sit down and update you guys. Also, I got locked out of my account because I forgot my password, and honestly, I only just managed to recover it now, so I'm really sorry that this update is months late, but here it is. So first things first, the divorce has been finalized. Yeah, that's right. It's still so surreal to think that something I fought so hard to stop just happened anyway, right in front of me, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. The divorce went through, and no surprise here. I didn't qualify for alimony or spousal support. We didn't have any kids, and all of David's property was considered premarital assets, so I literally walked away with nothing. The prenup had a cheating clause, which, as you can imagine, came into play given my situation. So yeah, I wasn't expecting anything at that point, but it still stung. Once everything was finalized, I immediately packed up and left the state. My parents, true to their words, helped out by sending me money and booking a plane ticket, and I got out of there as fast as I could. Now I'm back home, and let me tell you, it's not exactly the homecoming I would have wanted. If I hadn't been at rock bottom with nowhere else to go, I probably would have avoided coming back here altogether. My family, they've been relentless. Every single day, I'm reminded of how badly I messed up. Like, yes, I know I fucked up. Trust me, I'm reminded of it every time I look in the mirror. But they won't stop. It's like they think they need to keep drilling it into my head, as if I haven't already felt the consequences. It's exhausting. I get it. I made a huge mistake, and I've paid for it. I'm still paying for it. But at this point, I just need them to stop. I need some space to breathe, to figure out what's next for me. On the plus side, my parents did help get me a place to stay before the divorce was finalized. They reached out to an old friend of theirs who took me in temporarily. Thankfully, the divorce didn't take long, so I didn't have to impose for too long. But during that time, I cried more than I ever thought I could. I even reached out to David again, which I know is embarrassing. I begged him to forgive me. I'm not proud of it, but there it is. Of course, he didn't. And honestly, can I really blame him? 7 affairs. 7. What was I even thinking? If the roles were reversed, I wouldn't have forgiven him. So why did I ever think he would forgive me? Now that I'm home, I'm still trying to figure things out. I don't have a job, which is driving me insane. I'm home all day, every day, and it feels like I'm losing my mind. I've been applying for jobs as much as I can, but the market here is terrible, and nothing's come through yet. It's frustrating. I need something, anything to keep myself going because sitting around in this limbo is torture. To everyone who hated on me, well, you can go ahead and screw yourselves. I don't have time for that. For all the people who thought this was fake, really? Trust me, I have better things to do than come on here and fabricate some ridiculous story. My life is already messed up enough without me needing to make things up. And finally, to those few who gave me real practical advice, thank you. Honestly, thank you for trying to help when I was at my lowest. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I appreciate it more than you know. That's pretty much it for now. I don't know what's next, but I'm just taking it one day at a time.